Good evening. This is Donna Blomquist, librarian at the LaSalle Public Library. Welcome to tonight's virtual program, What's Up at NASA? Before we begin, just a few programming reminders. On Tuesday, September 13th at 6 p.m. Central, join us for another tempting look at easy meal ideas with delicious results. This time, University of Illinois Extension Master Gardener, Natalie Martin, will provide recipes and cooking tips for enjoying a favorite garden vegetable, the potato. Join us virtually for the humble potato. On Wednesday, September 14th at 7 p.m. Central, the library will join libraries across the state in virtually hosting award-winning actress, Illinois native, and deaf rights advocate, Marlee Matlin. In celebration of Deaf Awareness Month, Ms. Matlin will share the highs and lows of her Hollywood career and journeys as an activist. And on Tuesday, September 20th at 6 p.m. Central Time, the library will virtually host Anglophile and former UK resident Claire Evans for her presentation on the UK's national dish, fish and chips. More than lunch or a national identity, fish and chips has a long history that includes the beaches of Normandy, many immigrant cultures, secret fishing grounds, and the Cod Wars. Get ready for a deep dive into the history of fish and chips with Claire Evans. And as always, all library programming is free and open to the public. It is also shareable, so please feel free to pass the information on to others. Please post your questions in the chat. We want to hear from you. And tonight, NASA Solar System Ambassador Scott Pellican will present What's Up at NASA. There are so many amazing missions, so let's get started. Scott, welcome. We're not hearing you, Scott.
How's that?
We can hear you now. The joys of technology.
Well, thank you for the introduction. And I've already made a note on the deep dive into the fish and chips. I'm not going to miss that one, that's for sure. But it's an honor to be asked to join LaSalle Public Library with all the great events they have. So again, thanks to Donna and Rachel down there. And Rachel, once again, is going to be mission control for me tonight. So thanks to her in advance. So wow, what's up at NASA, huh? Not anything at all, right? If we've been paying attention to the news, it's incredible what's going on in space. I think NASA currently has, last number I saw was 80 some odd missions currently in space, whether those are science missions or discovery and exploration missions. So wow, so much going on, and I thought we would just spend some time on a few tonight. To some that are kind of favorites to me, and those, of course, that are so much in the news now. My wife and I recently, earlier this summer, were fortunate enough to spend 16 days in Italy for our 35th anniversary. So while I'm physically back in LaSalle, I'm still in Italy. So I thought we would add a few little Italy tie-ins here tonight with our program. As you can see there on the screen, there it is. There's the boot of Italy, and down to the left, Sicily, of course, and that is a wonderful photograph taken from the International Space Station. So I thought we would start there with the ISS and what's been going on there. They are, of course, a lot in the news lately, but just some quick background and some on the history of the ISS and some facts. The International Space Station was built as a cooperative between the United States, Russia, Canada, and Japan. Construction started, I believe, in 1998 and really lasted almost through the year 2011. But there were astronauts actively on the space station beginning in the year 2000. The space shuttle played an important role in hauling materials up back and forth and running large items up for the construction of the International Space Station. It weighs about 1 million pounds. It's about the size of a football field from end zone to end zone. It flies at a steady altitude of 248 miles in the air, in the sky, and every 90 minutes it circles the globe. I know there's a lot of International Space Station apps you can have. So if you're up north fishing this summer, you can go to your app and see every 90 minutes when the space station goes overhead, and many have. It travels at a speed of 17,500 miles an hour. To date, there have been roughly 260 different astronauts on the space station, from 20 different countries. There usually are 7 astronauts on board. They've had as many as 11 at times. Currently, there are 7 astronauts. 3 are Russian, 3 are American, and Rachel, if you can show us the 7th astronaut, she's Italian. What do you know? So a little Italian tie in there. This is Samantha Cristoforetti. She's an Italian Air Force pilot, and this is her second trip on the International Space Station. So we've got an Italian up there to tie into our Italian theme tonight. I believe there is a couple new astronauts going up for replacement in the very near future, within a couple of weeks, I think is what I've heard. So there'll be a little bit of a crew change, but there's Samantha right there from Italy. How about that? The space station, the primary, I think, function, the primary thing that they've been able to do is study human physiology, the effects of humans in space for long periods of time, studying things like space radiation, isolation, confinement, distance from the Earth, microgravity, and just living in closed environments. If we get into, as we move into deep space exploration, those kinds of things are going to have to have been studied and researched. And of course, they also look at food, how to grow food, how to repair things, how to make things in space, all kinds of science, of course, as we all know, and that we've heard of with the space station. Obviously, it's been in the news a lot lately, and there's a lot of questions being asked about the future of the space station. Some time ago, it was determined that the space station will be decommissioned around the year 2030. At that time, it will be set on a path to return to Earth and crash into the Pacific Ocean, not in an area that would cause any trouble to coral reefs or things like that. But with the advent of the war in Ukraine, obviously there has been a lot of rumbling, a lot of talk coming certainly from the Russian side. On the space station, they have their own areas. You have the Russian area, you have the American area, the European Space Agency area that Samantha belongs to. NASA and its administration has put on a smiling face when it comes to everything we're worried about with how things are getting along up on the space station. They say things are proceeding as normal. At the height of the Cold War, some of you may recall Apollo Soyuz, where we had Russian and Americans living together up in space on the Soyuz spacecraft. So it's nothing new, but as the Ukraine troubles continue, there's been a lot of words that have come out of Russia. They initially came out and said in a huff that they were going to leave the space station in 2024. No one really took that very seriously. Now we've heard 2028, perhaps sometime before the decommissioning. So that's yet to come. It's something they're going to have to deal with politically. NASA and the Russian Space Agency will continue to work. There is of course, we have the Houston Mission Control. There's Mission Control in Moscow that works with them. And so far things have proceeded normally. I'm not up there. It's a small environment, roughly, the size of perhaps a gutted out 747. So they're professionals, and I believe that they are continuing their work. But there's going to be a lot of moving parts as we get towards the end of the life of the International Space Station. Now, China also has a space station right now. It's been there, I believe, since 2020, still being constructed, but a lot going on there. And Russia has already said that they plan on building their own space station in the future. As far as the United States goes, NASA has decided to move forward with a space station operation, working along with private industry, much like they do now with a number of their missions and SpaceX and things like that. They have selected 4 companies which will help the construction or build their own space stations along with NASA, stations that NASA can use for their continued presence in low Earth orbit. They do not plan on leaving that space at all. NASA will be pitching in on the costs of this, but they will not be footing the whole bill on the construction of the next post-ISS space stations. As I mentioned, there are 4 companies that have been selected. They will begin construction. Much like they'll go up and begin work on the new space stations, attach it to the existing space station, build it up, and eventually release it for operations. These companies believe that they can function successfully economically in space. They believe there are numerous types of sciences and universities and industries that will utilize the post-ISS space stations. And their primary customer also will be NASA. So NASA is very involved right now with the construction and what's going to be, what these new space stations are going to look like, because they will continue for, I'm sure, for a very long time to be the primary customer for these private industry space stations. But again, this is NASA's continued move toward commercial contracts on what they do in space. It'll be very interesting to see how this all goes going forward, how long Russia will stay into it. But the space station, International Space Station, has been, of course, an amazingly successful mission. And again, we've still got a long way to go in it. Many astronauts to go through it. It's got a different future, that's for sure. But again, we'll see what happens, especially on the Russian end of things. With that said, we'll move on to what is going to be what's in the news lately, and that's in the Artemis program. And I know we were all kind of, well, not kind of, but very disappointed that the launch was scrubbed yesterday. And you get a lot of folks who, another delay, another scrub, there it is again, one more time, we all show up. I think they had an estimated 200,000 people down at the Kennedy Space Center. The Vice President Harris was there, and it's always disappointing. But that's just the space business for sure. But as we moan and groan and grumble about it, I want to have Rachel play a brief video, and I hope you'll pay special attention to the words on the video. Kind of remind us of what space is all about and why we're doing it. Go ahead, Rachel, if you would.
But why, some say, the moon? Why choose this as our goal? And they may well ask, why climb the highest mountain? Why, 35 years ago, fly the Atlantic? We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon.
3, 2, 1, 0. Liftoff on Apollo 11.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
We all remember that, and I'll add the words of another famous American, Tom Hanks, who at the end of course, one of our favorite movies, the 1995 movie Apollo 13, and the last line of the movie, Tom Hanks said, "I often wonder when we'll be going back to the moon, and who will that be?" Well, now we know. We're going back to the moon with the Artemis mission. And if you listen to President Kennedy's words, these things are hard. And we do them not because they're easy, but because they're hard. And things will not be postponed. And I think his words resonated, especially yesterday with the scrubbing of the launch. And as they like to say at NASA, space is hard. And yesterday was an example of that. But they're going to get it right. They're going to do it right, and they will fly. As we were waiting to come on tonight, NASA had a briefing to kind of go over what went on yesterday. There were a couple issues. The weather was a little more prominent in their decision to scrub the mission than I think we had initially heard. But they have announced that these are issues that they are going to be able to take care of on the launch pad. That's what we were kind of waiting to hear are these things that they can work on the SLS on the launch pad, or is it a situation where it would have to be rolled back to the vehicle assembly building, which would be a much longer delay in the launch, weeks of delay, as it takes, I think, 3 days to just roll the thing back to the vehicle assembly building and then begin work on it and then roll it back out. So it's very good news that these are problems that they believe they can fix on the launch pad. And they've selected Saturday, this coming Saturday, September 3rd, as the new launch date. It sounded like it was going to be sometime in the afternoon. I had to leave the press conference to prepare for this, but fingers crossed. They had the NASA weather guy on there, and he said the weather looks promising, and for Saturday. So fingers crossed on that. So here we are with Artemis. The Greek goddess Artemis was the goddess of wild animals, the hunt, and vegetation, of chastity and childbirth. But most importantly, she was the twin sister of Apollo, which gives us, of course, a great tie into the next step is Artemis. I think we tend to forget that the last time we were on the moon was 1972. So we're 50 years out from being on the moon. Believe it or not, how time flies. 50 years since we've been on the moon. So the question most people ask is why the moon again? And it's very simple. NASA believes that we are looking at going to the moon and then onward to Mars. NASA's focus now is going to be deep space exploration. That's where the focus of the budget's going to go, and that's where the focus of the work's going to go. There are those who would tell you, probably even in NASA, and I think they have, that sure, we could probably develop technologies. We could probably throw it all together and make an attempt at a direct Earth to Mars mission. But it was finally decided that the best thing to do was return to the moon. We're going to go to the moon. We're going to test the rocket, test the spacecraft, test the landing vehicle that takes us down to the moon, and we're going to stay. We're going to stay for longer periods of time, 30 days, 40 days, 50 days. We're going to learn to live and work on the moon as a stepping stone to Mars. And one of the keys of that is if things do go wrong, like we see go wrong, you're only 3 days away of returning to Earth from the moon. if you're going out to Mars, you're a good 6 months away on a one-way ticket. Space is risky. Space is hard. Again, I think they just firmly believe that let's build, let's get back to the moon. It's been 50 years. Let's test everything. Let's see how to do it on the surface of another celestial body, being the moon. And then we're going to head back, and then we're going to head out to Mars. The timeline now, for even with a short delay here, for the Artemis program is, of course, to launch here in 2022. There will be a long delay before Artemis 2. Of course, the launch, to backpedal a little bit again, just for clarification, the Artemis 1 will be unmanned. It will go out on about a 40-day trip orbiting the moon. It will travel out beyond the moon about 40,000 miles before heading back for orbits around the moon, where the equipment can be tested and studied and all those things. They've got 3. It'll be carrying not humans for this flight. It'll be carrying the 3 mannequins. NASA, in its never-ending wit, calls them moonikins. Of course, they're just crazy out there at NASA. And those mannequins will test radiation levels, long-term radiation levels, and things like that. Obviously, the radiation levels are different on the International Space Station as they would be as you go farther out into deep space. So they're going to go to the moon. We'll be leaving in 2022. They don't plan on Artemis 2 happening until 2024. That seems like a long time, but this is the way it's planned out. And I think and there's a lot of grumbling that I was watching on NASA press conference the other day, a lot of questions from reporters on why Artemis 2 will take 2 years to get going, but NASA gave all the right answers. And we have to also always keep in mind budgets. They have to do it because of the budgets and the amount of money being spent. Things need to be done in chunks. If Artemis 2 will be a manned mission, will not land on the moon, but much like the Apollo 8 mission preceding Apollo 11, it will orbit the moon, return to Earth safely. And then hopefully in 2025, we will return and put humans on the moon. That's the timeline right now for returning to the moon. So a week's delay, if we stick to the amazing words of John F. Kennedy, we do the hard things. We're not postponing anything because we can. And we look forward, we have fingers crossed for Saturday on the Artemis launch. And as the Artemis program proceeds, hopefully we'll be talking more about it. I'm sure we will, on how it's proceeding as we step out to Mars. The estimate, in case you're wondering, the estimated goal for humans on Mars now looks somewhere around 2040, perhaps. So, Donna, I'm just going to give you a little heads up. You might want to have another ambassador in your back pocket for the 2040 program on the Mars landing, but just to kind of give you, fingers crossed, though, you never know. So,
Okay, well, just in case you want to step aside for that one, but we're counting on you to be here.
I am too. I'm counting on at least seeing it. That's for sure. That would be something. But to get back to the moon would be great. So fingers crossed on Artemis this Saturday. How about it? Okay. Okay, Rachel, what do we have next? Let's see here. I believe we're going to move on to a mission called DART, and we're just going to show you a quick video on what DART is all about. If you would go ahead and play that. Thank you. So there it is. And what you saw there was dark. This is our, I believe, our next slide. I'm not sure, but that's fine. We'll talk a bit on dark. What you saw there was what's actually going to happen, and it's going to happen very soon on September 26th of next month at 7:14 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. What you saw there is going to happen. NASA has launched DART. It is out there in space, and it is going to attempt to bump into that asteroid that you saw to redirect it. DART stands for Double Asteroid Redirection Test. We're fascinated with asteroids, certainly in the United States and beyond, especially like Hollywood, right? I mean, Hollywood just can't stop making asteroid movies. I think there have been over 20 made, and I had heard that just in the last 3 years, there were 7 more asteroid movies in production, believe it or not. So we are certainly fascinated with asteroids. And of course, as we know, we've had a run-in with a large asteroid before, certainly, that had its impact on the dinosaurs, as we all know. But we do want to be prepared the best we can for such an event again in the future. So this is just a test. So going to see if DART there, that little spacecraft, can bump into this asteroid. It's called Dimorphos. It's not a threat to Earth. It's just one that they picked out that they're honing in on, and we're going to give it a little bump with that spacecraft to see if it can be taken out of this trajectory in the event that at some time in the future, such that may work for that killer asteroid that Hollywood is promising us is on the way. Now you may have noticed during that little video that there was one portion where just before impact, another very small spacecraft pulled itself out of the DART spacecraft. And it would look to be about the size of a small filing cabinet. Solar panels expanded. Staying in our state, what that small thing will do is record what happens at impact. Obviously, DART can't record it because it's going to be destroyed. But that small other spacecraft ejects itself right before impact and will record the events to hopefully be the successful events of the redirection test. Now, keeping in our Italian theme for tonight, that small object is called LICIAC. I'm sorry, Liscia Cube, and it was built by the Italian Space Agency, which, believe it or not, is part of the European Space Agency, which gives me a little bit of pause. When my wife and I were over in Italy, we were told upon arrival, I'm not being mean about this, we were told this by our Italian guides that nothing works in Italy. And that kind of worked out to be true. So I got really got my fingers crossed on this small spacecraft that's going to record how DART does its job. But I'm sure it will be perfect and work just fine. So again, that's coming up real soon on the DART tests again in September. So that's going to be interesting to see. There was recently some concern that originally it was believed that the asteroid they were hitting was a very solid object, which DART would only make a small crater in to nudge it out of the way. There are some scientists believe that we may not be so sure about that its consistency is more like a combined pile of rubble. And if that's the case, we may not have the effect as it's softer than they believe it is. But at this point, they're going for it, and we'll see how it all works out with the DART test. So now there we are. And this is, are we on Juno? I think we are. Is that the right one? I believe so. So there's Juno with Jupiter right there. So, and again, on our Italian theme, in the year 1610, Italian astronomer Galileo Galilei first discovered Jupiter's 4 largest moons: Callisto, Ganymede, Io, and Europa. In the year 1610, if you can believe it. And now 400 years later and beyond, NASA is back visiting those moons and visiting Jupiter. Of course, NASA has been to Jupiter before. Pioneer 10 was in 1972. It was the first spacecraft to cross the asteroid belt and the first spacecraft to photograph Jupiter. Voyager 1 and 2 took the first photos of Jupiter's moons in 1979. And in 1994, the Galileo orbiter witnessed a comet impact on the planet. But visits to Jupiter were neglected after that. But we're back there now. The Juno spacecraft was launched in the year 2011 and arrived in the year 2016. And spent 5 years gathering information about Jupiter itself. Now it's exploring Jupiter's moons, and for good reason. Many scientists believe, when we talk about exploration of planets and things like that, there's one goal in mind, and that is discovery of life, and most likely microbial life. And that's what they look for in space exploration and discovery. And many scientists now believe that perhaps the best chance of finding that microbial life may not be on planets that we know. It may be better found or more likely to be found on the moons of these planets. And in particular, at Jupiter, the moon Europa, which is an ice-covered planet, and scientists have good reason to believe that there are saltwater oceans on Europa under the ice. So Juno is swooping in to get closer looks at the moons of Jupiter, and discoveries will be made. There's already been some fantastic discoveries made on the Juno mission. And again, the search for microbial life continues. This time at the moons of Jupiter. We're gonna, as we lead ourselves into the James Webb Space Telescope, we recently got a photograph from the telescope back of what do you know, Jupiter, and I think I'm going to have Rachel put that up to see that. How about that? That's an amazing view of Jupiter from the James Webb Space Telescope. If you look closely, you can see that we've got some rings on the outside here, but look at that as we lead into a little discussion on what James Webb has been up to. Just an absolutely breathtaking photograph, one of many that have been coming in since the first images on July 12th that they're providing. So what an amazing tie-in there to the Juno mission, and just a gorgeous picture. I can tell why we have skeptics about these things, because it's just so amazing, fascinating picture. So James Webb, let's go to the next slide, and we'll just talk a bit about the telescope. We of course earlier in this summer, Donna was kind enough to have myself and our fellow NASA ambassador Joel Napper, who Donna has worked with very closely, and thank goodness for Joel. He put together such a great program on the Space Telescope, the history of it, the workings of it. I threw in what I can along with it, but just an amazing accomplishment from NASA. It sits now 1 million miles away in its little honey spot there, where it's studying the universe. Things have gone well. There was one little incident with a little bit of a space dust hitting one of the mirrors, and NASA is not surprised that could possibly happen, and they're comfortable that nothing was damaged. So it's continuing on its journey. Everything is working well. As we discussed in the program on the telescope, different scientists, universities from all over the world are taking turns using the telescope to discover the programs and the science they're looking for. and it's continuing on, and we'll be seeing the kind of pictures we saw there with Jupiter the rest of this summer and all year long and going forward. It's going to be amazing. A couple of the highlights of the things that they have discovered. 1 week after the first images in July, astronomers detected galaxies equating to about 300 million years after the Big Bang. So that is going as far back as they were really hoping to go. They're already seeing those images from that far back. And then soon after that discovery, they thought they had detected a galaxy that may have existed at 200 million light years after the Big Bang. That particular data is still being confirmed, but they're going back that far. They've seen a star called Earendel, which was also detected by Hubble, but the detail now that we're able to see on this particular star is so much greater with James Webb, and that object, it was estimated to be at 12.9 billion with a B light years away. And lastly, we saw a round orange and brownish object sitting in deep space that later was confirmed to be a slice of chorizo, the spicy Spanish sausage that was posted online as a prank by a French physicist. And a lot of folks fell for it at first, but those crazy physicists were having a little fun, but it turned out just to be a spicy piece of chorizo. So if you slice one open, you can kind of get a view of whatever had everybody's tongue. It looked like an amazing discovery in space, but someone was just having a little fun with this on that one. So anyhow, we'll continue, of course, to see these magnificent photographs and images and data coming from the James Webb Space Telescope. So far, so good. Everything looks great, and it's proceeding as planned. Again, as if you were lucky, if you perhaps joined us for that presentation, it's just an amazing bit of engineering, science, incredible spacecraft that's sitting out there a million miles away and going to send us all kinds of information and amazing pictures. So from the James Webb, we will go to Mars. Let's beat Artemis to Mars, and there sits the Perseverance rover, and it's up there right now. And Mars is not new territory for us, the United States. Even as early as 1964. Mariner 4 orbiter flew by Mars. It was our first flyby of Mars. And in 1975, Viking was the first to land on Mars and send back color images. NASA's had over 20 missions involving orbiters, landers, rovers in that time period, but Perseverance is the latest. It's an amazing rover. One of its highlights is that it's autonomous. In other words, it makes its own decisions in its brain on where it should go and things it should do. Obviously, NASA has some direction over it, but it can make up its own mind on where to go and things to do. In the past, we have been able with our lunar landers and our Martian landers and orbiters to dig up some dirt from underneath the belly of the spacecraft and put it in something that we could analyze it right there on the surface of Mars and send back information on that. But Perseverance has the ability to drill into the Martian surface. And it is drilling out cores of rock that won't be analyzed there, but will be analyzed back home here on Earth. So how are we going to do that? We've got to get those cores back from the Martian surface. Perseverance does not have the ability to launch itself back up into space. So what's the plan? The plan is that the cores will be left in a certain spot. And as the technology is developed and put in place, NASA will come down and retrieve those cores. They have an idea of how that's going to happen. And it's still in the process of happening, but the cores aren't going anywhere. They'll be fine. Now, there's of course, a standing joke with NASA in that, you don't have to worry about picking up those cores. Elon Musk can go up there and pick them up for you because he's probably going to get there before you guys will. But NASA is going to proceed anyhow. The estimate for picking up the cores was supposed to be, I believe, late in this decade, right around 2030. And I believe that's been pushed back a little bit. I suspect it's not the technological end or the engineering end. I suspect it's probably got more to do with the budgeting end, on money to be spent to retrieve those cores from the Martian surface. But that will happen at some point. But Perseverance has been running around up there. It's visited, it landed in a place called the Jezero Crater. It's now moved on to the Delta area where it is not believed, but established where water was on Mars at some point. So we'll keep an eye on the Perseverance rover. It's done an amazing job, performed amazingly well. The other part about this particular mission is Perseverance has a little buddy, and that is, if we go to the next slide, Rachel, that is Ingenuity. And Ingenuity is a helicopter, believe it or not, that has been flying around on the Martian surface, believe it or not. It's a very small object. I don't know, the atmosphere of Mars is so much less than ours. I think it's like 1% or something like that. And although I do not know anything about aeronautics or flying or things like that, I think you need a lot of that kind of atmosphere to get lift, that you can actually fly something like this. Hard enough on Earth, much less Mars, but believe it or not, they were able to build this thing that actually flies around on Mars. It just recently made its 30th flight on the Martian surface in the area. Usually the flights last around a minute, maybe a little bit less than a minute. It's just amazing that they could actually get this done. It has been kind of in hibernation lately because where they are right now is the Martian winter. So it can't be, the solar panels don't have a lot of sun right now to provide the power for it to operate. There's also been a little bit of concern that dust is beginning to build up on the solar panels on Ingenuity, which may prevent it, may shorten its lifespan up there, but it's already proven itself to be incredible in what it's done. It'll fly ahead of Perseverance kind of as a scout sometimes out there. Amazing that on Mars that this is happening. So Perseverance and Ingenuity still going strong on the Martian surface. So we've got one more mission that we want to look at, and that one of my favorites, and I think one of Donna's too, is the Parker Solar Probe. And there it is, and of course that is our sun behind it. Just grab my notes real quick here on the Parker Solar Probe. And there it is. The sun is an ordinary star. It's 4.5 billion years old, and it's one of among billions of stars in the Milky Way galaxy. But it's the only star in our solar system. And it's the center of our solar system, the sun, of course. It's the largest object in our solar system. You can fit 1.3 million Earths inside of the sun. And the gravity of the sun holds our solar system together. Everything in our solar system revolves around the sun. It sits 93 million miles away from Earth. By comparison, the moon is 235,000 miles away from Earth. So the sun is a big deal, and we all love the sun. And NASA is out visiting it again with the Parker Solar Probe. Eugene Parker was a scientist at the University of Chicago who did groundbreaking work on the sun. He became the only person ever to be able to witness the launch of something named after themselves. He was able to watch the launch of the Parker Solar Probe, which was named in his honor, and that was launched in August of 2018. The probe itself is roughly, unfortunately, Dr. Parker recently passed away, I believe, earlier this year. The Parker spacecraft is roughly the size of a small car. It'll approach the sun at traveling at speeds of around 400,000 miles per hour. It will come as close to the sun as 3.8 million miles away. Now, that sounds like a lot. Again, the sun is 93 million miles away. And at its closest orbit, it's had a number of orbits already. It will get within 3.8 million miles from the sun. Sounds like a big number, but if you think of a football field and you're driving down the field from one goal line, Parker is going to get down to about the 3 or 4 yard line in terms of getting close to the sun. So why is it important? Well, as we know, it's the sun is everything to us, right? It provides us our light and heat on the earth. Without the sun, we don't have the earth as we know it to be, of course. So it goes without saying that the constant study of the sun is of course incredibly important. It's amazing inside of the spacecraft there. Parker will be close enough. I just want to take a quick look at my notes here, but it'll be close enough where it'll be perhaps 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit outside, but it has the ability to be room temperature, believe it or not, inside of that spacecraft where the instruments, the data collection instruments are, all the science is inside of there. So again, an amazing engineering feat to bring something that close to the sun, but be able to still do the science that's needed. The spacecraft is not able to take sun-facing photographs. That technology is just not there because they are so close to the sun. The closest photograph was recently taken by the European Space Agency, and that was at roughly a halfway distance between the Earth and sun. That's as close you can get. That is how incredibly violent that the sun is at that point. The sun, as it gets older, grows hotter, and at some point in time, the sun will deteriorate and expand, and could possibly be, as scientists believe, the final nail in the coffin for the Earth. Now, most estimates are that would be somewhere in the hundreds of millions of years from now, if not billions of years from now. And actually, other scientists believe that it could be another star that has the same fate, another sun that has the same fate that may also cause extinction on Earth. So there's lots of reasons to keep a close eye on the sun. Reports are the sun's been kind of violent lately, with worse than expected solar flares and things like that. And those things, as we know, can affect radio communications on Earth, all kinds of communication problems, things like that. But there is really no danger to humans because of the protection we have from our magnetic field and our atmosphere. But it does have the ability, an active sun does have the ability to cause a lot of headaches for sure down here on Earth. So all the more reason to keep a very close eye on it. And NASA is doing that with the Parker Solar Probe. So we're getting close to the end of the program, and I did want to just show a couple more photographs as kind of an ending thing here from the James Webb Space Telescope. Do we have another one? Next one up, Rachel? Yeah, look at, and this is why people say, oh, that can't be real. That just can't be real. But, that is something called the Carina Nebula. Nebulas, of course, are giant clouds of dust and gas. in space. This landscape looks like mountains and valleys with glittering stars. It's actually the edge of a nearby young star, in the nearby young star forming region. And this is estimated at a relatively near area, 7,600 light years away. And what we'll lastly show you tonight is something called the Southern Ring Nebula. It's 2,000 light years away. And it shows, and this is gases are moving away from a dying star at its center. And they've got a little video here, a kind of a zoom in from the James Webb Space Telescope on the Southern Ring Nebula to conclude our program tonight. Well, thank you so much, Rachel, there in Mission Control, and Donna. You know, we might find ourselves now in a new space race. There's so much going on. I think there are over 72 countries that have space programs. I believe last number I saw was 14 who are actually in space at this time. There's so much going on, but I'm constantly amazed when I look at a video like that. What the engineers and scientists, technicians, and all the people at NASA, what they do. I know NASA is a very polarizing agency for many people. We could fill a lot of potholes, I suppose, with the money we spend with NASA, but the idea of space exploration and discovery excites me, and I hope the presentation gave some insight into that.
Well, most certainly did, Scott. You know, I geek out over space like you do, so I don't need any convincing at all. You know, I think that the space program is similar to exploring anything. When I listen to Sylvia Earle talk about going down into the depths of the ocean, that's equally stunning and really invigorating. And I think that any kind of discovery is important. Not only for the knowledge, but for the human spirit. But that's just my commentary for tonight. We do have a few questions. I will try to find them on here. Is this them? Okay. Let me ask you these first. What happens to all of the debris when mission lands in the ocean? Probably all spacecraft, but maybe the ISS.
Yeah,
and
the
do
ISS.
they clean it up? Is there any damage to marine life?
I'm assuming a lot of it will burn up on re-entry, right? And they do have picked specific spots in the Pacific, again, where it would not possibly endanger coral reefs or anything like that. And I also would assume that any kind of effort would be made to retrieve whatever they could, depending, of course, on the depth and things like that. But this happens all the time. When we do get Artemis off the ground, Artemis is not a reusable rocket like we've seen with the SpaceX heavy vehicles. You know, and that stuff falls into the ocean. They retrieve what they can. They're as conscious as they can about it. So they'll do a good cleanup for sure when that time comes.
Regarding those rockets that are on the Artemis, they were refurbed from the shuttle days, right? So it wasn't like they were totally unused.
I believe, I'm unsure, I believe the engines.
The engines, okay.
4 engines were refurbed from the space shuttle program.
Okay.
I don't know if that's if that was just a cost-cutting effort. I believe it probably was to some degree. And I'm sure they're not knowing anything about engines or rockets. I'm sure that they were retrofitted to meet the needs of this incredibly powerful rocket. It's called a super heavy rocket, and they call it a super heavy rocket because it has to carry super heavy things, which makes sense. Good name for it, right? Because if you are going to eventually go to Mars, you're going to have to carry a lot of stuff with you. One of the reasons why this rocket, the rocket itself, is not reusable, that the boosters will fall off and not be used again, is if you're going to, my understanding is if you're going to have like one of Elon Musk's rocket that returned to Earth and land, that requires additional fuel and additional types of engine and things like that take up space. They need as much space as possible if they're going to go to Mars, because we'll be taking along everything needed to build infrastructure for the astronauts to live and work on the surface of the moon and also Mars. So that's kind of the reasoning that I understand behind that.
And isn't there also, that's one of the reasons to make Artemis the stepping stone to Mars at the moon, so that when a spacecraft launches for Mars from the moon surface, they don't have to fight gravity from Earth. Isn't that part of it? They need less fuel for that, even though the distance is farther.
I guess I'd have to say I'm unsure about that. They are going to build, as part of the Artemis program, they're going to have, well, actually between Artemis 1 and Artemis 2, and I'll keep an eye on the clock for you, Donna, but they need to, a couple of things really need to happen. They're still in development on the lunar lander. Okay, that is still in development. That is not on board this ride. And that's being built by contractors, the actual lunar lander, which probably will not look anything like the Apollo days, our little spider-like lunar lander we had then. They're going to build what's called the Moon Gateway. It'll be an orbiting platform where it will act as a staging area to go down to the moon and work on the moon. So when the Orion spacecraft in the Artemis program goes to the moon, it'll dock at the gateway. The astronauts will prepare themselves, and then from there go down to the moon, as opposed to what we saw with Apollo with the direct moon landing. And also NASA is constantly working on their spacesuits for their astronauts. This has been a bugaboo since the beginning of NASA, and they're going to need spacesuits that for the launch, and spacesuits for the travel, and then especially spacesuits for lunar living and lunar working, especially for Martian living and working. So those 3 things are the big ones that have to get done between Artemis 1 and Artemis 2, which has a lot to do with the 2-year delay. So we really got our fingers crossed for Saturday and hope for a great launch. And I hope everybody can tune in. I know I will.
I know I will too. We have another question here. I'm going on a cruise from Port Canaveral, October 3rd, and hoping to see something. I heard there is possibility of launch that day. October 3rd.
I guess I really wouldn't know where exactly to go to find out, but I'm sure some quick Google searching would, either it's in NASA or perhaps Cape Kennedy, would give you an idea on the schedules. I would think some Google searching is done. I haven't been anywhere. I got to get going here. I've not been to any of these things. I've got friends who were sitting down there waiting for the launch. Yesterday, they got there at 4 a.m. There was all kinds of people there. They were all having a great time, and I'm jealous if this particular person with the question is going down. But maybe Don. I'm not really sure, but there's got to be all kinds of things you can do online where you can check the launch schedules and
Yeah,
see.
I don't have insight on that, but I agree. I know we could find it. It's not too late to get in the car and drive down, Scott. You could make it by Saturday for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, we have another one. We have been living for years from the innovations gained from the space program to the moon, such as computers, special plastics, heat-resistant materials, and of course, Velcro. Beam me up, Scotty, right? Beam us up. So,
well, it's
NASA
funny.
go ahead.
No, please go ahead, Donna.
Well, back in 2014, when we had the big NASA exhibit here, part of it was NASA in space and NASA at home. And it was a comparison of all the things that have been innovations in the space program that we now use every day here, in our lives. And that is often updated in an online site. And if anybody's interested in that, we can post that also. It is truly an amazing thing to see these continual updates in what we are all benefiting from here on Earth, from what's in the space program. So I don't feel too bad about our tax dollars. I'm happy about it. What were you going to say?
I thought I'd also heard that the dustbuster was invented for the Apollo, so they could vacuum up there. I may be wrong on that, but I think NASA tries to. There's always, we got to justify the money. We got, what are we learning from this? And yes, all those things are wonderful and true. Especially the miniaturization of computers and things like that. But for me, the benefit is discovery, exploration, and discovery of our universe. That's what the money's worth it for me, just for that, for what we're seeing and what we may someday find out about the universe around us. That's still the key for me. And these other things are great tie-ins. I know NASA likes to to kind of beat their chest a little bit on all those great things. And it's true, the laundry list is never ending. But in the end, for me, it's exploration and discovery.
I'd like to hear from everyone when we have the pop-up survey at the end. If you could make your comments about what it is to you. Why is the space program important to you, and how does it make you feel? Because I think it is an important thing to think about. I want to be cognizant of everybody's schedule tonight. Scott, you have to be doing these programs all the time for us. We're going to get you on a lot more often. There's so much to talk about. But for tonight, I want to again remind our audience to please complete that pop-up survey once we close the connection. Thank you again for attending, and I hope you've all enjoyed this as much as we have. Scott, I'll turn it back over to you for closing comments.
Well, all I will say is thanks to the wonderful LaSalle Public Library and all you do, and thanks to Rachel again for handling things there. And I'm ready for a nice glass of Italian red wine.
I think I could go for that too, Scott. Again, thank you. And thank you to our audience, and watch for postings. Everyone who registered for this program will make sure that we also put in the link for that past archive program of the James Webb that we had earlier this year. And we'll see you at the next one. Thank you and good night.